Hello, everyone. This is Coach EJ, Eric Johnson, the brand.
And Coach Aaron Thigpen, the source. Today's topic, an athlete's self-assessment. What are your limiting factors? And what we mean by that is athletes should always kind of sit back and take stock of not only the good things that they're at, but what are the bad things? What are the things that might be holding them back from getting to the next level and achieving the success that they want? So I want to dive a little bit into that today and discuss with BJ some general factors that athletes can look at and parents can help an athlete assess. And in some of this, you may want to talk to your coach about. It's a great way to open up a conversation and see how your coach sees you and what light he sees you and your abilities, and get more information, because getting better is about getting more information. It's not just about doing the work, but it's getting more information so that you can do the right work.
Aaron's a great topic. I love it because, not many times do we really have athletes come up to us and ask us, hey, Coach, I need to kind of understand where I need to improve.
Right.
And, I like the way, we've broken down the areas into these 4 areas where athletes can really be accountable for what they do and how they go about doing it. So it's a great topic. I think more athletes that are playing competitively in all sports should be doing this. This is what we did, Aaron. This is what we did to figure out what we need to do in our sport to be the best. And I think it's a great way to start off our podcast by talking about, the first area and the second and third and fourth areas of these areas that we need to.
Yeah. So we're going to have 4 key areas. The first one is pretty straightforward, and this is probably where most of us spend our energy. And that's, what are your physical limitations? And when I look at that, I kind of look at it a few different ways. Obviously, everyone is always keyed in on, am I big enough? Am I strong enough? Mm-hmm. Am I fast enough?
Right.
And yes, those can be limiting factors. And of course, they generally are for a lot of people. And you have to improve those areas. But also, you might want to look at other things that might not be in your control. And the reason why I say that is we're all bound by our genetics.
Right.
And we have to have a realistic understanding of what we can get out of those genetics. And if those genetics don't match up with what we're trying to achieve athletically, then we've got to pivot. And so maybe it means not being a running back, but being a DB, a punt returner.
Right.
Not being a middle infielder, but being a third baseman.
Right.
So by being true to ourselves and really having our eyes wide open on what our genetics are, what our ultimate stature might be, how big, can we really get, how tall can we really get, especially if you're playing a position that requires that you be, 6'2", 6'3". Well, if that genetics isn't in your background, that you may have to make a shift.
Yeah, you can't play point guard, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're 5 foot, 5'5", and your competition's 6'3", and you're going against these guys, maybe you need to think about maybe I can't play that. Maybe I play shooting guard. I can't play point. I don't know, but for every sport it's different, right?
Yeah. Well,
it's key.
It allows you to make the adjustments so that you can shift either technically or tactically, so that you can get more out of your body and use it the way that best fits for you, versus just the general profile and beating your head up against the wall and finally coming to that point where, well, hey, you rushed for, I've seen this over and over. Have these football players, they rush for 1,500 yards in a high school season, but they're 5'7", 130 pounds. Well, you're not going to be a D1 running back. It's just that simple. So, if you realize that early enough, maybe you take those attributes and that skill set to another position that is going to be more open to you.
Yeah, I think a lot of athletes get in that trouble because, say he did run for 1,500 yards in high school, and whether it's Division 1, 2, or 3, he probably is not going to play that at those in college at those sports. You're right. You got to get into another position. We see this a lot. That's having honest assessment. That's why I call it honest assessment of what's going to happen to you. Right. And sometimes that's hard. That's hard to swallow sometimes, especially if you're very, if you're a very committed athlete, that can be difficult at times. But you have to do it, because if you don't do it, then you're not going to last in that sport. And I think that's what happens to a lot of athletes, is like they get really stubborn about it.
Oh, yeah.
And then they can't go ahead and, pivot. They can't pivot.
Well, again, it comes down to, what do you want to do and what do you like, what position you like to play.
Right.
Versus really what's the best position for you.
Right.
And for those athletes who want to continue their athletic careers, further and further along, I think this is something that needs to be done. So physical limitations.
Right.
First point that you want to look at. Again, taking into account all the basic speed, power, agility, those sorts of things. Right. Yeah, we know that. But looking at it from a different lens, you also want to understand, hey, what's God given me to work with?
Right.
Okay? Second, emotional. What are your limiting factors in those regards? And emotional, we're talking about fear, we're talking about stress, we're talking about embarrassment, frustration, anger. Right. All that, sports encompasses all of those, that range of emotions that an athlete has to learn to cope with. And, psychologically, how strong are you in handling and coping with those things and putting things in perspective, and again, being really honest with yourself. I was one of those kids who was on that little league mound,
right?
With tears rolling down his eyes because the umpire wasn't calling strikes, or the guys behind me were flubbing balls, and this inning is going way too long,
right?
I was mad because I wanted to compete and I wanted to win, and that was something I had to work out of as a youngster,
right?
And I channeled that anger into performing,
right?
But that really wasn't the best way to handle that.
Right.
Basically, my coach left me out there and was like, "Hey, deal with it, man. Get the outs.
Get the outs. I know you can.
You want to stop crying? Get the outs."
So. When you say that, I think about John McEnroe at Wimbledon, and he's yelling at the referee, and he's doing, he takes this energy and channels it into winning Wimbledon, because he just says, I'm against you and I'm going to beat you and I'm going to compete. And, you see a guy like that, and, and all these exceptional athletes, they have a way of pulling themselves out of despair and taking it to the next level. Right. And we encourage athletes to do that. You're going to struggle. It's just part of the game. It's how you deal with it and how strong are you mentally. Sometimes, I always tell people, failure is not a bad thing for athletes.
No.
Failure only gives you the ability to keep moving forward and learn how to deal with many things, not only mentally but physically and just socially. There's so many things that bring out the best in you when things like that happen. So being really mentally prepared and strong is really a key.
Yeah, and I think not coaches, but athletes shouldn't be shy about this, because, again, back in our era, it was, suck it up and deal with it.
Oh, yes.
But now, people are a lot more in tune with, those sorts of feelings and how to handle them, and coaches are a lot more in tune with that, and probably have some skill sets to be able to help an athlete through that. Or at least you can find, people, sports psychologists, or even just start, if you're a young athlete, just talk to your parents first. Right. They've got the benefit of, knowledge and experience. Maybe even if they weren't an athlete, that can help provide a perspective that allows you to navigate those feelings and put them in the right box so that they don't affect your performance.
That's a good point you say about parents, because I think parents are better equipped for that these days. Mm-hmm. It's our generation, it's our generation, Aaron, that we are parents, and it seems like my parent wasn't like that. It's like, hey, get tough, kid.
Yeah.
And now us being parents and having kids and stuff like that, we're more equipped to talk to them and help them through that.
Yeah. I won't say I'm all the way there. My wife is better equipped than that.
There you go.
She's a social worker, but I still got some old school. I'm not all the way there. But again, being an athlete, I can relate. Being a previous athlete, I can relate.
Right,
and being a coach over these years,
absolutely.
I can relate.
Absolutely.
But I don't think I don't get that hair trigger, man. What are you talking about?
I know I do, Aaron. So I'm gonna even play with you. I get that. Too.
I'm not gonna fake it. But emotional, psychological.
Okay.
Take stock and see where you're at on some of those things. Do I get down after I strike out or after I lose a race?
Right.
Because you might have 2 more races. You might have 4 more times that you're going to get a play. Shots in the basket. So you can't let that one thing take you down, and you can't get too emotionally wrapped up in that one aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Now, on the other end of the spectrum, and I do like to talk about this, maybe it's just because I don't like, the whole show off and celebratory nature that I see a lot in sports. Sometimes I think it's overdone.
Yeah.
And it kind of, for me, I see it as a look at me sort of thing.
Yeah.
Humility.
Yes.
Because I think you've got to understand there are going to be times when you have success and sometimes when you have failure. Right. And you don't want those times that you have success to go to your head, because there is going to be a reckoning.
Oh, yeah.
Very few of us go through life undefeated.
Exactly.
And your competition will remember that. And it's not a good look, in my opinion. It's not a good look. No. As a coach, I don't like to see that with my athletes.
Right.
And as a recruiter, I probably wouldn't like to see that.
Oh, no. I think, that's what's wrong. I think somewhat, I'm old school about that, is that, watching Jordan, great athlete, watching Larry Bird, Magic Johnson. There's so many great Gretzky. These guys went out and just performed. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think of the guys who just went out and competed.
Quiet confidence.
Yeah.
Something to be said about
There's
that.
something to be said about that a lot. It's classy. It's classy. And sometimes that's missing in sports.
Yes.
Is that.
Yeah. Especially now with social media, because people are trying to make, everyone's trying to make a highlight.
Yeah, they are. They're it's Sports Center. It's Sports Center, and look at me, and they're doing everything. Like, all the attention needs to be on them. And to be honest with you, a elite athlete, they know that they are elite, and they don't need to show that.
Yeah. So that was number 2, emotional and psychological. Number 3, technical and tactical. Do you have any limitations on how you might be approaching playing your position? Are there things that maybe you're not doing as well technically, as maybe your skill set isn't up to par in what you're trying to do? Maybe your tactical approach on how you're going about your plays, or whatever the case may be, or how you're going about your at-bats, or how you're going about running your routes. Maybe that is a limiting factor, and you're not doing those as well as you can. But what I'm trying to say in essence is be a student of your sport. And as you become a student of your sport, you start to understand the nuances of what it takes to be good at your position. But not just at your position, but also, to take a step further, you should know your opposition's position. Because now it helps you do that math in your head and anticipate his options in responding to you.
Right.
And that's what the great athletes do. They're able to almost anticipate what their opposition is going to do and get there first. or do something,
Right.
some other kind of athletic sleight of hand that keeps them off balance. So that's the way I look at that aspect. How about you?
I love that, because I always think of it this way. You when you're thinking about something, whether it's tactical or technical, there's a practice routine and there's a game routine. And a lot of players don't know how to practice. Thus, I call that a practice routine. And they just practice without any type of purpose.
Right.
Then when they get in the game, they don't know how to react because they didn't really have a good routine in practice.
Right.
So I always think there's a practice routine and there's a pre-game routine that allows you to play or perform at a high level. And I think about when you said that, I think about Richard Sherman of the 49ers, the defensive back that's been a Pro Bowler, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer too, and how he studies film all the time of how the wide receiver runs a route and how he does a certain move and he knows which way he's going to cut. And I always think about that with athletes, that and that's a practice thing. He's practicing and watching films, and then he gets in the game, he knows what that wide receiver is going to do.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, athletes, young, professional, whatever the case being, youth athletes, they need to have these routines. It puts their mind at ease. And I think that can go both ways, because if you practice correctly and you believe in yourself, that gives you confidence, and you're just so much more sure of yourself. And I think that goes a long way. So when I think of that, Aaron, I always think about that Richard Sherman kind of mentality, how he goes about it. And I think about practice routines for athletes in all aspects.
No, I agree. I mean, basically, it's what we call sport IQ.
Right.
What's your sport IQ? And I don't think athletes should limit it to just what their position requires of them.
Right.
Because again, the great ones, they know what the opposition is likely to do.
Right.
And if you practice that, your mind is able to go through those calculations lightning quick and understand, hey, this is what's going on in front of me. Especially when you're talking about, sports where you're out on the field or out on the court.
Right.
And you've got to read the landscape of what your opposition is doing. You've got to do that fast.
Right.
Or even a batter. He's got to be able to say, okay, well, that last one was low and outside. I fouled that off, and he got one by me on the inside. Well, what's the likelihood he's going to go on the inside on me?
Yeah. Those scenarios.
Exactly. So when you're talking about practicing, you're talking about not just rudimentary fielding the ball and throwing it to first base,
right,
but actually going through the scenarios in your head. Well, this one I'm imagining the guy's 2/3 the way to first base. What am I going to do with the ball? Am I going to hold it or am I going to throw it? Or there's a man on first and he's going. You can kind of go through those things also in your head. I think, and rehearse them. Obviously most teams will practice them, but you can also just do that on your own.
You should be doing it.
And understand that, okay, hey, this is a playable play. This is not a playable play.
Right.
Or this is where, high probability of what I should be doing here versus that.
No, Aaron, it's kind of funny. And you bring up a whole bunch of other branches off the tree. Our generation or generations before that, and I look at kids now and I ask kids questions all the time. What are you thinking in that situation? Did you see it this way? And trying to get them to verbalize,
right,
what they're saying, because a lot of times kids don't know.
Right.
They're looking for answers, or youth athletes are looking for answers in any sports that they play, and you want them to open up their imagination and see everything and not have such what I call tunnel vision when they're playing their sport, where it's just looking at only one thing, They're not looking at the whole field or not looking at the whole picture, Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you've had that frustration many times with your younger athletes, but maybe even your older athletes, where it's like, why'd you make that play to first base? You have a guy right here,
Right.
But they have that tunnel vision.
Right.
It's like, oh, I got to throw that guy out at first, but you know what? You didn't worry about holding the runner on at second before you threw the first.
Why? And,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do know what you're saying, and
So-
I'm trying to understand why this is happening more now. And this may be another podcast, Aaron, for us, but, why are athletes only thinking so...
I think because they're being coached early
Mm-hmm.
and they're being drilled.
Okay.
So when athletes get into a game situation, they're repeating the drill. They're not playing.
Right. I like that. Playing. That term, playing.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense there. I like that.
But anyway, that was number 3. Technical, tactical. Number 4. Communication. And I know this one comes out of left field for a lot of people,
Yes.
but as a coach, and again, as a former athlete, just looking at my own experiences, I think communication is a very big limiting factor for athletes.
Right.
If you don't know how to communicate, with your coach, with your trainer, whether again, if it's, some of the emotional, psychological things you're dealing with, whether it's asking about, hey, what are some of my physical limitations, coach? Whether it's, what should I do in this situation, coach, because I don't know.
Wow. That's strong right there, Aaron.
Those, an athlete being able to communicate with those involved with them is so important. And it's not only them communicating, but also how they receive information.
Okay.
Because communication is just not one way. It's not just me saying something to you. It's you also receiving what I'm saying. And if you're an athlete whose ears aren't open, then you're not going to receive the information that people are trying to give you. And again, I look at training as an exchange of information from the coach to the athlete.
Right.
And if you're not coachable, whether it's because you don't just want to hear it, you don't want to be corrected, all of those sorts of things, you think you may know more than the coach, you don't respect the coach's ability, whatever, that is a limiting factor.
It is.
And it's something that I think that we always aren't aware of. And sometimes it's stuff that might even be how you communicate at home. Right. And you have to be aware of that. There's a lot of athletes who don't like to take criticism. As soon as they take criticism, you give them criticism, they shut down.
Yeah.
I had to have a talk with an athlete's parent just the other day. He came in, it was his eval. I said, yeah, he was doing pretty good. Then I gave him a critique, and I saw him shut down.
Yeah.
And I said, that's a problem. Because the training here is about me imparting information. It's not just about the physical things that he's doing. And if he shuts down and he's no longer hearing what I'm saying, he's no longer allowing himself to progress.
Right. That's crucial. And Aaron, that's so important, because kids really struggle with communication. Players, youth athletes struggle with it because I think they think we're attacking them, or the coach is attacking them. The coach is not attacking them. The coach is trying to help them progress, to make it easier for them to grow. And a lot of times when you talk to athletes, they don't respond.
Yeah.
With you. They don't respond. They don't go, hey, listen, I was thinking that too, coach. What do you think about this ideal? You think that works too?
Right.
We have some athletes that do that, and that drives us to really help them, because it's the engagement of conversation. And coaching's all about communication between the coach and the athlete, I feel. It's so crucial. That's how you grow, not only as a coach, but as an athlete too. So your point is well spoken.
Yeah. I mean, your ability to take direction, pay attention, is probably one of the biggest factors in your growth as an athlete. And if you can't, if that's not a skill or something that is in you, you're going to be very limited in what you're going to be able to achieve. Another thing in terms of communication, communicating with your peers, and those sorts of things.
Oh,
and teamwork
yeah.
and the group dynamics, especially for those of you guys that are in team sports.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
if you don't have the ability to communicate well with your teammates, you guys aren't going to be as competitive as you can be.
Can be cohesive,
Yes.
right? Can be cohesive, and that's in team sports, as we know, that's important.
Yeah.
That's how you're able to whether get outs or make baskets or score touchdowns or score goals. And it's communication not only off the field, on the field.
Yeah.
It's communication. Timeouts.
Yeah.
You know, this is what I'm seeing over there from this guy.
Right.
Maybe if we could do this over here, we could probably get this going our way.
Yeah. Lifting each other up, all
Right.
of that. Yeah.
You know, you need that. That communication's huge in sports.
Yeah, I mean, even in track and field, yeah, it's an individual within kind of a big group team that
Right.
scored as a team, but we would even as sprinters on our relay team,
Right.
we would say, hey, okay, you know what? This guy on their second leg, he's able to do this. So this is how we think you should run your leg to draw him, you know, out or to,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So even that sort of communication is something like in track and field, when you're running relay races, to form your strategy
Right.
is good. You know, even
Absolutely.
though most people think, okay, you just get the baton and run, but there's actual strategy to sprinting.
Oh man, just get the baton and run fast.
Yeah,
And that's the end of the
yeah.
race, right?
But no, we actually, you know, have
Right,
different
exactly.
strategies in how to handle our competition.
Absolutely.
And we, you know, we communicated that to each other. So I think communication, both sending and receiving,
Mm-hmm.
is very important and can be a limiting factor to a lot of athletes.
I think you're absolutely right. Most definitely. Well, those 4 topics right there, Aaron, allows us to get a good assessment about, you know, what these athletes, what we can do individually as an athlete. And I think, you know, it's good that the parents are hearing that, good that the athletes are hearing that together, so they can kind of figure out what direction they need to go. And with that said, people, that wraps up our podcast today. So we'll check out next time at all our Twitter accounts that we have. Hardball Athletics, of course. You know where we're at on Twitter. You got Facebook. We're on Facebook, Instagram. Check us out on LinkedIn and everything like that. We like to have your input in not only in our podcast, but any type of insight would be great.
And be sure to share our information. We want to grow this community, have more of you participating, and that's it for today.
All right. We'll see you next time, people. This is Eric Johnson, the brand.
And Aaron Thigpen, the source. See ya.
See you later.